Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Ministry on the Margins podcast. I'm Josh Olds. This podcast is where I talk to different church leaders, faith leaders, just people in general about ways in which the church can be better, should be better. And today I am with someone very special, someone I've known for a long time. It is none other than my wife, Kelsie Olds. And she is on the podcast today, not just because of nepotism. Is it nepotism? If
I don't
it's
think so. I'm not your son.
You're not. Wifetism? Wife? I don't know. Anyway,
Spouse.
she's on the podcast, not just because of that, but because she's actually, believe it or not, more famous than me. She's written a book. It's called I can't read it back. I always get the title wrong. But Your Child's Point of View.
Yes.
And the subtitle is very long.
Understanding the reasons kids do unreasonable things. It's not, look, it's like in a little square. It's not that long.
It is. I think it's because this was not the first title you came up with, and I helped you workshop titles.
Yeah, so you've got all of them in your head.
And I always do that. We wanted to have her on the podcast today to talk about this book, particularly in relation to faith and church, which might at first seem somewhat of a stretch, but living with them, I don't think that it is. So I guess before we get too deep into that, let's just start off by talking about what is this book, what made you want to write this book, kind of for a general audience, and then we'll talk more about the specifics as pertains to the audience, the purpose of this particular conversation.
The book is about parenting, teaching, working with children. It is probably more geared toward parents, but it's not exclusively geared toward parenting. It has 5 different sections, and in each section, each 2-page spread is its own thing. So you could open it to any page, just read that, and then close it and be done, and pick up later, and you wouldn't have missed anything. So it's made to be really visually accessible, and on each 2-page spread, the left-hand side has 2 word bubbles. One word bubble is an adult describing some kind of challenge they have with their kid, some kind of concern they have about their kid, something that they're not understanding why their kid does that. And the second word bubble is the child or a hypothetical child reframing what it is that the parent is concerned about from the child's point of view, which is why it's called Your Child's Point of View. On the right-hand page, then there's 2 sections, things to know and things to try. So things to know gives relevant developmental information or about that age or about that stage or why the kid might be doing this. And then things to try gives some practical problem solving tips about it. And so it goes for everything. The sections are babies and toddlers, littles and middles, tweens and teens at school. And then the last section is your inner child and what you might be saying to yourself when you're getting overwhelmed or yelling at your kids or getting really anxious or things like that, and then what your inner child might be saying about that. So it covers everything from my baby is throwing stuff all the time or spitting, and I don't want them to be doing that, all the way up to more complicated kind of teen behaviors like stealing or lying or procrastinating. The school section covers different ages from preschool up through the upper grades, and it just kind of it gives both practical answers to those questions, like literally what do I do, my kid is spitting on the floor, literally what do I do about that, but it also gives a framework for how to approach other ones that the book doesn't cover, because it can't be literally exhaustive about every single.
It would be a much larger book itself.
Really
all right, one of the things that is to me so interesting about this book, one thing that I know that you spent a lot of time on, was developing the accessibility, the visual component to it, because it was very important to you. This doesn't just come across as another, like I don't say a regular book, but bringing that accessibility, that ease of understanding, that you're not just going into like, oh, there's something wrong with my kid, what's going on, okay, I need to find in the index first, and go through that, and then there's just paragraphs and paragraphs of information. This is very very visual, so if you learn in a visual way, this is sort of geared towards you. And I know that we're on an audio podcast, but we're also recording this on video. So for those of you listening to video, here's your book. Just kind of show the camera what you mean by that visual component.
I've got on the one page the 2 word bubbles at the top and bottom, and then on the other page it's got things to know, things to try. The page that I opened to is she refuses to do simple things that she already knows how to do and insists she needs me to help her. She's known how to do them for years. She doesn't need my help. And this is in the littles and middles section, so talking about kids from like 4 to 8 years old. It may actually possibly be in the tweens and teens section. I'm not 100% sure. No, this one's littles and middles. And then the child's possible point of view is, please take care of me even though I am big. Don't expect me to do everything all by myself just because I physically can't. I emotionally can't. Mm-hmm. And if you read, that page and the things to know and things to try about it, and then you flip to the next page, now it's about a new thing. Mm-hmm. So if a lot of times I work with families and one parent or caregiver is either more invested in or has more capacity for or has strong feelings about the way that something should be changing in their parenting or something isn't working, and the other parent might either have less time for it or they're not as invested. They're kind of just doing it because their spouse wants them to, or they don't learn in the same way that their spouse does. One of them really likes to listen to podcasts and the other one would rather read a book. And so this is really, I guess, me trying to bridge that gap too. I can't make somebody learn something that they're not at all interested in, but I can try to bring it as close to accessible to them so that it's not just like, you either need to read this, PhD level dissertation on parenting, or else you just can't be a good parent to our kid. I don't want it to feel that way.
Yeah. So this is very layperson in the sense this is supposed to be meant to be a quick guide for parents. Yes. For sure. But also has value for teachers, has value for anyone who is in leadership over kids or young adults.
Yes.
And I think probably even has value for people who are in leadership over adults, because you're talking about, this last section, the inner child. It's also about considering who we are in our own upbringing and how we bring that childhood self into ourselves as adults. I want to get into sort of some of the specifics of the themes here. Before I do that, 2 questions. Number 1, how did you pick what things went into this? Like, there's so many things that you could have talked about. How did you choose the exact ones to use, and which ones hit the cutting room floor, you couldn't make it in there? How'd you know these are the ones that people really need the most help with?
So I have a Facebook page where I do a lot of posts and a lot of discussions about, I get a lot of questions and do consulting and things like that. Part of it is that some of them are like directly the same themes that were brought up when I had asked in the past, like what does your kid do that you can't understand? And then as an exercise, gone through the comments and me reworded, like I was basically doing a prototype of this book. Mm-hmm. If people commented and said, I don't understand why my 2-year-old just screeches like a pterodactyl all the time, then I would, as a sub comment on their comment, reword it and be like, I'm experimenting with my voice, I'm figuring out what I can do, and so that was my first practice for what this book would be. So if I saw the same themes come up over and over in those types of posts and discussions, then I knew that they were relevant to more than just one parent who happened to be the one commenting, because people would say, yes, me too, yes, mm-hmm. I'm waiting for the answer, I want to know why my kid does this too. And then also just from my work as an OT and work with parents over the course of years, I know what kinds of things tend to be both developmentally typical and also weird. And so people may not talk about them because they feel like my weird kid is the only one doing this weird thing, when in actuality, it's so common that many children do this thing, and just nobody knows it because it feels weird, and so you wouldn't talk about it. So I put those in there too.
All right, so my second question, you kind of already talked about this a little bit, is this like, why you? Because you're just a guy. Like, why? why
just a weird little guy.
Why listen to you?
I mean, good question. I wake up in the morning and ask myself that sometimes. I do have occupational. I've been working as an occupational therapist for since I graduated in 2018. Before that, I was studying psychology, and I was, volunteering with kids, and I've been working with kids since I was 11, when I was put in charge of the children's ministry at our church. So,
And a child shall lead them.
I mean, granted, the children's ministry was like 4 people, so that was part of it. But I have been working with kids for well beyond half of my life, and I have observed a lot of stuff with kids. I have been in a lot of settings with kids, and part of my job really is just kind of telling people what they don't know because they have such a small data set. If you've got 2 kids
You only know
and
those
one
2
of them
kids.
does a thing and the other one doesn't, you have no idea which of those is normal.
Right.
Especially if you've never really hung out with kids, or if your
Right.
friends don't have kids, or if you work in a office with grown-ups who aren't kids. And so a lot of what I do is just being like, no, actually lots of kids do this. And so I do have that experience in addition to professional experience, and then I've got the online platform where I end up talking to thousands of people at the same time, and so that gives me even more not deep data but wide data to be able to say, like, this is relatively normal at this age, this might mean this, and those kinds of patterns that I can see with more just literally more data.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the theme of the book is your child's point of view, and that's striking to me because I feel like we live in a world where the viewpoint of a child is typically not taken into consideration
very
often.
much so. Yeah,
it's
both literally and metaphorically super duper true.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you even like, where are light switches, how tall are toilets, like the world is not built with kids in mind.
Yeah. No, it brings up like an accessibility thing for kids. Like, you're talking about from a practical standpoint. What is difficult about this? I think like things like, oh, my kid doesn't want to wash their hands, and it's because the hand dryer is super loud to them. And
hey, whose kid are you talking about?
I'm talking about ours. But also, I think the realization, that
and then
hand dryers are.
They did a study.
Yeah.
They did a study and found that the height that children are at, the frequency of the hand dryers is actually like literally louder and more painful, and adults are not, like, they can both, yes, it's just loud, but also adults are not being hit with that frequency because of the shape of the hand dryers and the height that it is on the wall. And so everybody who ever thought just like, oh, well, you're just sensitive to loud noises, but like it's literally hurting you in a way that it doesn't do to adults.
Yeah, and it becomes very easy to dismiss the perspective of children because they don't really hold any power in a lot of sense.
Can't vote.
And then when they to use a term that you probably wouldn't use but is common parlance, act out.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Right.
Then they're seen as the ones that are causing a problem, when all they're really doing is alerting you, the adult, to a problem that they are having, and that's 2 different things. So let's start by let's talk about a little bit about that child's perspective. I mean, you wrote a book called Your Child's Point of View, so to ask you the question of why is a child's perspective important seems kind of like obvious, but go on and give us an overview of that.
So, I mean, really a great deal of the work that I do is literally just reminding people that children are humans, because the expectations that are placed on children are not even commensurate with the expectations that are placed on adults. Like, the way that people talk to kids, the way that people expect kids to sit still and be quiet, the way that the comfortability level of what kids are expected to do or endure, and the emotional regulation that kids are expected to have. They've literally got less development on all of these things, and the expectations are still more than what people expect from other adults. It's just that the ways in which they express these things are usually societally unusual for an adult to be doing. Like, if an adult in a supermarket threw themselves down on the ground and started crying, everybody would be more likely to be like, a very serious problem is occurring for you to be acting this way, versus a 3-year-old doing that. But if you put an adult in the same level of sensory overwhelm of environment and the same level of expectations and the same, level of demand, they might react similarly. It just wouldn't be a supermarket that caused them to get to that point. And so everybody thinks, well, the store is just a normal place and you're acting in an abnormal way, when really if you were under the same level of pressure that a kid is under, you might act in a way like they are. Or if you think about acting out, like you said, hitting someone or kicking someone, or doing something that a kid might do that seems like bad behavior, and you're like, well, I'm an adult and I would never hit anyone or kick anyone. And it's like, okay, but if a scary masked kidnapper ran up to you and was acting to you with the same level of demand and fight and, pressure and all of these things that a kid's nervous system feels like they're under, you might punch that guy and try to run away from him. Like, it's just that you're like, well, I'm their parent, I'm not a scary kidnapper, and so if I tell parents a lot, your kid is reacting to their circumstances in a way that makes sense for their nervous system. That doesn't mean you just have to let them and no one ever can do anything and everyone has to let their kid punch them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it makes sense. And if you start from a position of it makes sense for you to be acting the way that you're acting, let's find a way to meet that need that works for both of us. Then you're already coming. I mean, if you only just knew and bought into that one sentence, you would be a million miles in the direction of, more respect for kids, more seeing them as human, more actual problem solving that works, as opposed to just putting the locus for all of the problem on the kid.
Mm-hmm. So what you're telling me is that children are actually human beings.
I am, in fact, telling you that children are human beings.
And they have souls.
Yes.
Wow, you learned it here. Yeah.
I remember a huge, since this is a ministry podcast, I remember a huge shift for me, I think before we ever even had kids, or possibly when our oldest was like only a couple months old, was a post, and I don't know where it's from. If I did some searching, I could probably find it, but I don't remember where I read it or why. But I don't even remember if I read the article or just the title. The title was "Your Child is Your Neighbor," and I think it like blew a hole in me in a way, because I know the Bible backward and forward, and yet I still had these really ingrained power structures in my head from how they were modeled for me in my own childhood. And so I was just carrying them forward as an assumption of fact that now, I used to be subject to these power structures, and now I am the one in power in these power structures because that's just the way of things. And even just that article title leveled the playing field in a way that I had never thought of before.
Yeah. I think Christianity has a problem with authoritarianism.
Oh my gosh.
And that
you don't say.
That's its own hours long thing of podcast. And we could talk about that in terms of leadership of churches. We could talk about that in terms of
dissertation.
That's my dissertation. That's in my entire dissertation. That's leadership.
You literally wrote a dissertation on that.
That's leadership of families as well. Mm-hmm. That evangelical Christianity, not just evangelical Christianity, a lot of Christianity holds to a very authoritarian, usually patriarchal power structure, and that really it's
soaked into the culture.
It is
too.
Soaked
so
into
if
the culture.
Someone's listening to this and they're like, I've never been a Christian, I didn't grow up Christian, I'm not Christian, they're still, if they're in Western society, they're still so steeped in the culture that it's, I mean, the amount of families who I work with, I don't like to stereotype because you are the one who stays at home with our children.
Right.
And you are in many ways, we are very non-gender roles, traditional family very in many ways. But the amount of families who I work with who are like a mom being like, well, I want to, listen to our kids and respect them, but the dad doesn't want to. And I'm trying to respect the dad, and the dad thinks they should just do what he says. And we're all at this impasse. Is like, I mean, it's like 75% of families who I work with, if not more.
Yeah.
And many of them are not personally religious in any way. It's just baked into the culture.
It's baked into the culture, and it's it's hundreds of years old.
Yes.
Like that's the thing, isn't it? It's not. it is justification from Scripture, coming from a culture in which there was another option, like Christendom of like Western Europe, Western Christianity, and even as we've seen sort of the West move into a post-Christian society where there is a movement away from Christianity for a good many number of reasons. But it seems like we're taking the authoritarianism along with them because it is that feeling of that sense of power. Why do you think that? We've had this area, and I think maybe we're doing better. We kind of had this era of what's popularly called deconstruction. But people are maybe deconstructing, and they are still left with this feeling that, at least when it comes to parenting or when it comes to maybe teaching children, leading children, that there still has to be this hierarchical structure. Why do you think that even as we kind of moved away from being like, well, of course everyone is a Christian, everyone's within this Christian thinking,
right?
But then as we deconstruct away from that, we still have this idea of like, we have to take the authoritarianism along with us.
If you hear me in my book.
Okay, there's a page for that, folks.
In the inner child section, there's a part that's relevant to this. I didn't bookmark these in advance or anything like that, but let's see. I can't get through this page without getting emotional. So this is from the your inner child section.
Yes.
So the first speech bubble being the adult's point of view as an adult, and the second speech bubble being the inner child of that adult, potentially, speaking into them or why they do things like that. And so the adult's point of view says, I don't want to apologize to my child when I snap at them. I don't want to have to constantly connect on only their terms. I don't want to be the one who reaches out every single time. I want things to go my way for once. And the inner child's point of view is, I've earned the right to be the one who gets their way. You'll get your turn eventually. Right now, it's mine. I waited for this. And then in my things to know section, I said, these feelings are common if you were raised with old school methods and you are trying to do something different now without a lot of resources. You may feel robbed. You spent your whole childhood waiting for relief from the situation you were in, only to grow up, choose to parent in a different way, and ultimately end up lacking that relief you longed for.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is really intertwined with what you're describing. Because I think that as much as people would like to, and I do think that there is logic and things like that built into it, but I think that more of it is emotional than people realize. Mm-hmm. More of the feeling of kids should just do what I say is emotional than it is logical. Now, there is some logic to it. Like, I have a classroom of 30 children, and if all of them would just do what I said, we could actually have a good time because everybody would just be listening and doing what I said, and then I would be able to be more relaxed, and then we would be able to be more, all of those things. I'm not saying that that's illogical or that it makes no sense at all. But I do think that there is a big component of it where it is just like, but I'm just tired and this is just hard for me, and I just want it to not be hard for like 12 seconds. I just, and that's all of that. Whether the teacher example or the emotional example or all of that is really coming from a framework of looking at your kid as if they're your adversary. Mm-hmm. Like, if you would just cooperate with me, then everything would be great and I wouldn't be tired and you could have fun and I could do more fun things with you and, whatever, because you would just be behaving good and it would just be easier for all of us. You're really comparing that with a universe that doesn't exist, because if your kid is having a problem, they're showing you whatever the problem is by the way that they're acting. Mm-hmm. Like, they're showing you that there's a problem. So if you're like, well, if you would just stop, you're like, they can't. Mm-hmm. It's not that they won't, they can't. And so you're imagining some universe where you've got a robot or a dog and not a kid who, is having a problem with whatever it is. And that is the root of why it is that they're acting that way. And you can zoom out and look at a lot of societal things, the lack of play that kids have access to, the lack of freedom, the lack of autonomy, the rise of internet spaces as the only available third space, and I don't say that in a screen time fear-mongering way, like painting it with a broad brush like I hear people doing, where they're like, oh, well, everybody's got an iPad and that's why everybody's got problems. But I mean, the fact that there is not a safe place for kids to play and be kids, but digital ones are available, and they're not even safe.
They're not safe, but they're available.
But they're physically safe. No one's cracking their head open,
yeah.
You know, and no one's like worried about you getting kidnapped. So the other dangers are being ignored. And so like, and I mean, then you could keep zooming that out and be like, well, and parents don't have the resources, and parents don't have healthcare, so they're worried about their kid cracking their head open, and parents don't have money, so they have to work for 1 million hours, and so they're not at home with their kid. I mean, you could say all of these big, huge sweeping societal things, but you can't take the blame for all of them and pin them on a 3-year-old melting down in a store. You know, you can't just be like, well, if they would just get their act together, everything would be fine. Even if you are acknowledging this is too big for me to personally fix, this is not my personal fault. It can be true that it is not your personal fault, and also you're not your kid's personal fault.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how, like, you know, 40 or 50 years ago, sort of the previous generation, maybe the generation that are like grandparents now, grew up in a world where it was like there was both this, usually this sense of very like rigid authoritarian structure.
Yeah.
You know, I can think of ways in which, you know, my parents were raised, and the way that their, you know, parents interacted with them was kind of more strict and structured at times, particularly their fathers.
Yep.
But there was also a lot more freedom,
right?
Because, you know, this was the era in which they had commercials on television saying like, "Hey, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your child's at?" And you're like, 10 p.m. It's been dark for 3 hours at this point.
Yeah.
This isn't like sundown. You know, or it's like, you know, oh well, as long as you're home by the time that the street lights come on, and that culture has changed.
Yes.
But the authoritarianism hasn't. And so what that does is that it leaves the child with less freedom.
Right.
They can't go out and just be on, and maybe that's a, you know, probably some of that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Probably some of that isn't.
And even that there's like a positive side to all this. It's not just like, you know, it's not just like a lack of parents are trying to solve everything for their kids. Parents love their kids. They want to make all of their needs get met. They want to make sure that they're literally never sad and never uncomfortable and never frustrated and never anything for a second. And they're stepping in to solve all of these little things. And that also means that both the kids don't have practice with handling frustration. They don't have a safe environment in which to do that. They don't have the skills or the tools with which to manage that. And the parent doesn't have any practice with letting the kid be frustrated or get in an argument with another kid and both of them be mad and be like, you're not my friend anymore, and stomp away. And the parent not feel like they have to rush in to solve that and make them talk it out and make them apologize and make them whatever. There's this flip side to it where, I mean, all you had to do is join any parenting group, literally any parenting group on Facebook for 5 minutes. And it's like, parents want to solve every single thing. And that's not out of not loving kids. That's out of, yes, loving kids and not realizing how much the smothering is making issues worse because they don't have space to mess up. To mess up on kid stuff, which is not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Even if your 4-year-old says, "I hate you" to another 4-year-old and then never talks to them again, it like, you know, I don't mean to say that means nothing or that it's not important to the 4-year-old. I'm saying it's not the end of the world for an adult.
Right.
The adult has to be able to both be like empathetic with the kid going through that, but not drag down into the kid level where the adult is now as concerned as the 4-year-old about 4-year-old social problems. Because by working out 4-year-old social problems, which is always clumsily, because 4-year-olds are just clunky creatures, by working out 4-year-old problems, then they get to where they can work out 6-year-old problems, and they get to where they can work out 8-year-old problems, and then you know when you're an adult, you can handle the things that are handed to you as an adult because you've had a lifetime of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, the practice is getting interfered with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just by parents too. I said this about parents, but it's also by school spaces are heavily policing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody was just commenting on my page the other day saying that the school has outlawed tag because the kids were tagging too hard. And you know, there's and then again that zooms out into all the societal stuff with liability issues and healthcare issues in America. And you know, like if somebody gets shoved over on the blacktop and needs stitches, then who's responsible for that and who gets sued for that, and who, like, you know, you can trace these threads, all these ways that they go into our culture. But again, the end result is always that so much of the weight gets put on an 8-year-old.
Yeah, it's so entangled that we're expecting a child to engage and interact in these adult structures. And honestly, these adult structures that don't even need to be, and we're getting into a larger conversation about the way society is structured.
Yeah.
You know, because if you are in an area of where healthcare is a human right,
Yeah.
and you can just go receive that, then I think you're more likely to not care because you don't want kids to get hurt. But there's not
casual.
You can be like, this is a part of childhood.
Right.
Yeah, go climb the tree. Yeah, go run around on the black, whatever it is. And you don't have to feel like the safety isn't just about the safety of the child. It's about your own financial safety.
Yes, literally.
Another element to it, and I think this might be, for me personally, what I kind of like struggle back against is like anything that my child does that I wish they wouldn't do. I feel like it's a reflection on me as a parent.
Absolutely, that's huge.
And that is, not necessarily,
or that I think it's okay.
Right.
So
if
my kid says I hate you to another 4-year-old, and I don't immediately swoop in and be like, we don't hate our friends, and we use nice hands, and we use nice words, and then either the kid or the parent or whoever, someone observing, or just the invisible observer in our head, is going to think we condone
whatever behavior.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one, because I think that for some of us, it is, we are thinking about our own parents.
Yeah.
In that, like, when you see your child misbehave, whatever that is, and you think, I would have gotten in trouble for that.
Right.
And you think, well, I need to get my kid in trouble for that.
Yeah.
And you may not even, be consciously following that process through to understand where that's coming from. But just sort of a sense of like, well, if it was just me and them, I wouldn't care. But because we're out in the public, or then I don't want them to do that. How do you like start to like overcome that sense of trying to place that on your child?
I mean, it's not like there's like 2 easy steps, and if you just do them, then you're there. But I do think that coming to that mindful awareness is a huge part of it, realizing what it is. So I get so earlier in my parenting, especially, I would get so dysregulated from stuff my kids were doing, out of what I feel like was like a internal sense of like, wait, when kids do this in the presence of adults, the kids become unsafe. Even if it's just me and the kid in the house, and we're not being observed by the public eye or whatever, there's still some like internal little inner child inside me that's like, oh no, we're becoming unsafe because you're making us unsafe. I have to stop you any way possible. And then I become the source of the unsafety now, because of this feeling of like, hang on, stop it before the adults hear us. As if I'm in it with the kid.
You're going to get us in trouble
when
I'm the one who is in charge of determining whether or not something's in
Yes.
trouble. Yeah.
I actually wrote a funny, this was funny and not really serious. Some of this stuff is really serious, but a funny example of that was that on our first 4th of July, we got a little wading pool. And I mean, our kid didn't even wade yet because he didn't even walk, but we just like sat in it. And then when we went inside, I dripped water all over the floor. And I thought, I better get towels before the mom sees that I've got water all over the floor. And then I was like, I'm the mom. Who am I talking about? This is my house. And that was not like a deep-seated fear reaction. That was just me. That was like an idle thought. But sometimes I do feel like it is in a fearful way, and it makes you feel like you need to react immediately, or somebody's told you before, well, kids won't understand the consequences of their actions unless there's like a 1-second pause between it. So you have to react before you have time to think about it, or else they won't be able to make the connection. And then that's just encouraging you to act on impulse and not consider anything that you're doing. And so I feel like part of it is just being aware of this, aware of what your own triggers are, aware of what it is that's going on for you. Even just acknowledging that a huge amount of adult reactions to kid behaviors is really saying more about the adult in that moment than it is about the kid. It is really saying more about, does the adult know how to react to this? Are they tired? Did they have coffee yet? Like, and those things are not anything to do with the kid or their personality or who they're going to become. But if you ask the adult, well, why are you reacting that way? They would make up a reason like, well, if I don't stop him from doing that, then when he's 12, then he might do this. And when he's 30, then he might go to jail. And so I have to stop him from doing that. And what's really underlying it is a little bit of fear. And also, I'm tired. I'm grumpy. Yeah. My boss was mean to me, and so once you can realize how much of your reaction has more to do with you, then you can manage the stuff that's going on with you, or at least be aware of it, which is the first step, and repair when you mess up, which is like a emergency step that you don't want to have to get to, but you will, because you won't get it right all the time. And I feel like once you start becoming aware of it, then you've almost like kicked off the process, because everything that you do from then on is going to be in the pursuit of living better in your own body, which is going to support figuring out how to help your kid live better in theirs. Once you stop being like, this is just your fault. You're just a bad kid. Yeah.
All right. As we start to close, I want to bring this into the context of the church. I really talk about this in terms of like church leadership, church ministry. What relevance do you see this perspective having on the way in which we do church? And that could be, through children's and youth ministry, or that could honestly just be through regular, the church and leadership as a whole.
Yeah. Part of my answer is that I'm not sure, because church and I aren't personally in a great place. Part of my answer to that is that people need education on child development, and that includes anybody in a church, because nobody knows anything about child development or what's normal for children to be doing. And part of my answer to that is that, I mean, in an ideal world, the church would be leading the way on counterculturally seeing kids as human and respecting them, and that means making space for them in and among the worship service. That also, I think, means making a space that's just for them, like not expecting them to just conform to adult spaces.
Both and.
But yes, both of the above. That if you need to be in this adult space, you are welcome, and if you need a space that's made for you, we have that. I just think that anything that follows from children are human means that anything that you would do for the grown-ups, okay, so what's the kid maybe not the kid version of this, maybe sometimes the kid version of this, but just like, how are we meeting this same need in kids? Like, if we, you know, if we're trying to meet a spiritual need in the grown-ups, how are we meeting that in the kids? If we're trying to meet a physical or a comfort or a sensory need in the grown-ups, how are we meeting that in the kids? Whatever that looks like as you're shaping the ministry that you're doing, because there are as many ministries as there are people. Not
Yeah.
quite, but that would be the guiding question, I guess, that overrides all other specific contexts or specific denominations or specific whatever. The overriding question would just be like, as you set this up, as you thought about your congregation, did you remember that the kids were also human beings, and then what did you do for them based on that?
Yeah. It's one of the things that I'm thinking about is the difference between I'm a pastor. I've been a youth pastor. I've been a pastor to adults. I've written church curriculum. A big difference I read a lot of church curriculum. A big difference between, say, children's church curriculum and adult church curriculum is that children's church curriculum is very like teaching based. Like, here's the lesson for the teacher for you to learn a point, a specific point, and this is the point. And if you don't come away from the lesson from this specific point, then you didn't complete the lesson well. Where small groups for adults tend to be very discussion based, and what did you think about this? And usually there's an encouragement of like, well, don't tell people that they're wrong, even if you think that they're wrong, then maybe figure out a way to redirect the question or find something in the answer to speak positively about. And I mean, if they're like, I don't think Jesus ever came back to life, then maybe you draw some lines. But overall, then it's like, every opinion is valid, but even if not every opinion is correct.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like you get that vibe in a lot of like children's curriculum at all. And that kind of goes back to the exact same thing of like, are you going to treat the children with the same sort of respect and I don't want to say autonomy, because there is some difference there, but like you don't treat children and adults the same in terms of the exact things in which you do, but you should treat them the exact same in the sense of why you are doing those things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and none of the philosophy is kids just need the exact same things adults need. It's like, whatever the underlying thing is, kids need that respect or that autonomy as well. So if I mean, I can think of examples faster from a sensory context because that's what I do with my job every day. But if I was like, oh well, adults get tired after standing up for a while, so we let them sit down. So let's also make all the children sit down. In any context, that's going to less meet the children's need than it does meet the adults' need. If you were designing whatever context, whether church or something else, with the same principle in mind, you'd be like, children get fidgety after sitting down for a while. We need to let them get up and bounce around. Like that would be the So that's like that equality versus equity type of conversation. The underlying thing is, how comfortable is my body? How much do I need to move it? The underlying thing is not sitting is morally superior, So that's the framework you need to come from.
We'll end with this, and this is a broad question. It's a difficult question. It's not really something that we've talked about up to this, before this off the podcast. What we're talking about this in terms of churches. What are some practical things that you think that churches could do differently that would see better the perspective of a child?
I think that the fastest way that I support people who are struggling to themselves understand the perspective of a child, the fastest way that I support people in basically doing what my book does as a model. But then if if your thing's not in the book, then how could you do this in your own household? Is to just imagine another adult needing the thing that the kid needs. or reacting the way that the kid's reacting or whatever. And so or imagine yourself and what you would need in that context. And again, you have to be able to zoom out slightly, because the context isn't when I scream and cry during a church service, because you'd be like, well, I never scream and cry during a church service, so I don't need anything. But like, if I was, you can usually imagine a hypothetical situation in which you would need whatever it is that the kid needs, or someone you love would need whatever it is that the kid needs. And then that helps you visualize the perspective on what supports might be helpful for them. Well, I don't scream and cry during a church service, so what would make me scream and cry during a church service? If I got a text message and I looked down at it and it said that someone I love was just in a car accident, I might start crying during the church service and ... Need to leave, need to step out, need to address the situation, want to be comforted, like whatever it is that comes after that ... is going to be closer to solving whatever your kid's going through than just being stuck on the solution of, I want them to stop doing the thing that they're doing.
Right.
So if I was trying to give somebody a quick suggestion, I think that would be my quick suggestion. And that really goes back to the, like, your child is your neighbor. What does your neighbor need in this situation? Like, what, who was a neighbor to that man? How you gonna neighbor your kid? It's not gonna be to be like, I'm on my way to a church service and I need to pay more attention to it and you need to stop distracting me. It's going to be to meet whatever needs it is that that person's having, even at an inconvenience to yourself. And so, like, that philosophy is just like the most simplest 5-word summary of any other pontificating that I could possibly do.
All right. Well, the book is Your Child's Point of View, written by the inimitable Kelsie Olds.
Although they did actually get a robot to imit me.
They did.
On Amazon, so don't go for that one.
All right. Yeah, don't.
There's a really AI-looking one.
Yeah, tell us about that. Make sure this is a funny anecdote to end.
Yeah, if you type in Your Child's Point of View, then there's another one that's called something like as if you ran it through a translator and then ran it back into English. It's like your kid's point of view, understanding why the reasons that your children might do unreasonable things.
Definitely not written by ChatGPT.
It's not that one. It's this one.
It's
the one with the beautiful cover made by my lovely friend Courtney Hurwitz, who's an amazing graphic designer.
And you can purchase this book on.
It's just on Amazon.
It's just on Amazon.
I know nobody likes Amazon. If you're a publisher, email me. If you're a publisher and you want to republish my book, send me an email. Kelsie@Occuplaytional.com.
And you also recently, this is a physical copy, but recently you reworked this book into an ebook.
Yes, I had to do some restructuring because the word bubble thing. On an ebook, you can make the text bigger or smaller, and you might be reading it on a phone or a Kindle or a big iPad, and so there wasn't any way to preserve the word bubbles without making them each images, which would then mean that you couldn't make it a different size, or it might be tiny, or it might not be accessible. That would reduce the accessibility, which is the opposite of what I wanted. So I had to rework it, and instead it has a really extensive table of contents so that you on the ebook, so that you can click on the issue that you're having with your kid, and it'll jump you to it, and there you go. And then you can go back and read whatever else you want.
All right, so last bit of news is if you've enjoyed this conversation, we've been talking about it, and see, I'm the one with the podcast. She's the one with the book and the big social media platform. I review books. I talk with authors. It's what I've done for a very long time. She's got a book. She's like, oh, you can talk to me. I'm like, oh, okay, we can do it. But there has been call, I have heard.
Make it sound like it's like Lord of the Rings level. A wizard showed up and told me that he needed me to do a podcast.
Yeah, that many people have said, we want you to do a podcast.
Yeah.
And if you've enjoyed this conversation, then there might be a limited run podcast upcoming based on your response that will talk about various things, not just related to church ministry,
or
broader. not in this niche, and not just related to the book, But sort of the broad topics, the things that they're already talking about on the occupational therapist, to bring that into an audio format, because we all know you can't read Facebook pages while you're driving.
Yeah, it's true. Not allowed. Don't do
And
that. But you can listen to our beautiful voices lull you to work.
lull. I don't know the word lull
Okay.
used in driving terms.
Energize you to work.
So we're going to be a very like,
or the store.
yeah.
Or the park.
There might be so we're not talking about a book. There might be a little more humor involved.
Yeah.
There might.
They're usually not this heavy.
Yeah. But we could really maybe some
He's a silly little man.
I'm
a silly little guy.
So yeah, so if you've enjoyed this conversation about the book and you would like some more, maybe conversational type of conversation in a podcast format.
If you would like some conversational type of conversation, you heard it here, folks. Let us know in the comments that you want to hear a conversational conversation, and we'll consider whether that might be a project that we take on.
You can engage us in conversation about our conversational conversation, and we'll converse with you about it and get back with you.
Tell us if that's something that you want. If you tell us a topic that you'd be interested in hearing a occupational therapist and a minister chat about.
See, I'm not an occupational therapist. I'm very much the dumb person in relation to.
You literally have a PhD.
I don't.
You have.
I literally do not have a PhD.
You did a dissertation and you have a doctorate.
I do have a
doctorate.
doctorate.
You have a D.
I have a demon.
You have a demon. You literally have a demon.
I know when they made a Doctor of Ministry degree and they were like, yes, this is how we shall abbreviate it.
You're like, I'm just the dumb one in the partnership. You literally have a demon. Don't sell yourself short. The demon is smart.
I think. That's one of these days. I'll get an exorcism and. Anyway, I don't know how to end this podcast because usually it just ends with me.
We're gonna go have lunch.
We're gonna go have lunch, and you go have lunch too.
So
goodbye.
You do something with your life. See you next time.